deserve this, brother.
All right. This show is a bit of a cross-website and cross-platform show. It is on our Fight Game podcast feed for F4W/Wrestling Observer. So shout out to all of you listening from that website. It is also on our Fight Game Media Patreon. Shout out to all the Fight Game Media Patreon subscribers. And if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome as well. I want to welcome my guest, someone who I've been wanting to talk to for quite a long time here. We've talked in person. We've talked offline. Now I get to talk to Jim on the air. Jim Valley, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So this show is scheduled to go up right before Thanksgiving. We're recording it a little bit earlier, but
I wore a festive sweater because we're Thanksgiving.
You did. So I wanted to start off talking to you about something that I am thankful for, that I've mentioned to you before, but I don't know if you even realize why I am thankful for you personally. So I'm going to explain for a second here why I'm thankful for Jim. When I first started doing shows for the website with Dave, I was trying to figure out different ways to record through different software, lots of trial and error. And really, if you are trying to start a podcast, reach out to me so that you don't waste any money, because I wasted so much money. Brian Alvarez told me that's what was going to happen. He's like, you're going to just waste a ton of money trying to figure out what to do. So reach out to me. I'll help everybody and allow you to save money doing this. But so when I started doing that, Jim very early reached out to me and was like, hey, this is what I do. You may want to do it. You may find something else, but here's some information. And I didn't ask Jim to do that. Jim just reached out because he was a good person and he wanted to help. And the second reason why I'm thankful for you, Jim, is in the beginning of the pandemic. This was like right when word about the coronavirus came out. You made me realize something that I should have realized all along. Now, I'm the type of person who, if I was sick, I was always going to school. I was always going to work. I wouldn't stay home because like, I can tough this through. Like, I'm fine. And what I didn't realize is that I might be fine, but it was the other people who may get sick because of me. Now, you would think that that's not something that I should have only realized in my 40s, but when it comes to things like flu shots, staying at home when you're sick, wearing a mask, like I didn't realize, and while we're at it, vaccines, that wasn't for me. It's actually for the other people around me. And you were the one who made that click in my brain. And so for those two reasons, Jim, on this show, something to be thankful for. I'm thankful for you. So I want to thank you for those things that you've done for me.
It's very nice. Obviously you're and I'm not saying this because of what you just said, your earlier monologue, but you're obviously a very considerate and thoughtful person. But sometimes even people with the best intentions don't take that extra step.
Sure.
And we've all, well, not all of us, but most of us, I think, have learned a lot since late 2019 and early 2020.
Yes.
And there's some people who still quote things that might have been common knowledge in late 19 or early 20. And they quote like things haven't changed or we haven't learned things. And that's exactly it. It's very frustrating. I don't know that we expected to talk about this, but, I have a friend who has since passed away from COVID, who's a little older than me. He was 53 and he had married again. He had a 40-year-old wife and an 8-year-old son. I think he was 9 actually. But, a second family who he was enjoying immensely. He was a very hands-on dad, a great husband, a very doting husband. But, he was very, he went down a rabbit hole of politics that unfortunately, clouded his judgment and took his life. And that's very sad. And, it's good when people are able to learn and adapt. It's like in the beginning of the pandemic, there were people saying, well, just stay home. All of you immunocompromised people stay home. Well, here's the problem is the people who aren't come back to the home and perhaps they infect people.
Right.
So that's, people need to take that extra step and recognize that, with my immunocompromised disease, I have got a disease that inflames the veins, the vascular system. And obviously, your vascular system is a highway to the body. Mine starts in the lungs, inflammation, blood in the lungs. I cough up blood. And, 30 years ago, this was a death sentence. There are doctors who are older who have said to me, why aren't you dead? Literally. I go to see my lung doctor and he comes in and goes, literally, he means it well in a joking way, but he's like, how are you alive? And so my point is that my disease starts in the lungs. And if you don't catch it in time, which they didn't catch it this past year in time because it went so quickly, it spread to the kidneys and spread to the heart and spread to the liver. And it caused failure in all those organs. And the whole body is connected. We all know this.
Yes.
But in the same way, like it or not, we are all connected. And that's the point to make.
Yes.
Yes, there are freedoms. Yes, there are individual liberties. And yes, you need to do your part in the community. But like it or not, we're all connected. And that is the point.
So because of this, what I want to do on this podcast now, unfortunately for the folks who are watching on video, the video will be up after this happens. So I'm sorry for you people, but for folks who are on the Patreon, for folks who are listening to us through F4W's website, send me an email, gg@fightgamemedia.com with this phrase, which is simply Jim Valley thankful. And we're going to give away one of Jim's shirts. So whichever one, I think you have a couple of them up there, right?
I have 3.
Okay. So
I have 3.
This is going to be US only. The international stuff is so hard for me to do anything internationally, unfortunately. So US only, but send me an email, gg@fightgamemedia.com with that phrase that pays, and we will get you set up with one of Jim's 3 t-shirts. You can pick which one that you like.
The effing king of recovery.
There you go.
Did I tell that story? Do you want that story?
No, go for it.
Okay. So a year ago, I was in physical therapy, intense physical therapy. And I was working my ass off. Matter of fact, my Facebook memory yesterday, which would have been November 19th, as we're recording this, said that I walked 100 feet from my room, my recovery room where I stayed inpatient, to the gymnasium using a walker and then used crutches. And when my therapist brought out the crutches, I was like, there's no way I could do those. And I did them. And I was so close to coming home in December, and then I relapsed. And during the time I relapsed, you're intubated and you have delirium and things, and you're in and out. And so there are parts of it I don't remember. And later in December, I remember one of my nurses had my file out, and she was looking at it, and she started laughing. I was like, I'm laying in bed, I can barely move. I don't mean this incredulously, but what's so funny? And she goes, well, one of the doctors wrote that he told you, he remarked how well you're recovering, and you said to him, well, of course, I'm the effing king of recovery. And so it's in my actual records. And later on, when I went back to the rehab center the second time, they had me work on my dexterity, my writing. And I was like, well, what should I write? And one of the therapists said, well, you should just write that you're the king of recovery. And I still have, right here in my office, I still have the,
wow.
That's what I wrote.
That's amazing.
I'm
That
the
is
effing king.
amazing.
And when I shared that story on Twitter, people said, "Oh, you should make it a T-shirt." So we made it a T-shirt, and it's so funny because now people call me king sometimes. I don't mind it. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just like, I didn't expect that.
So, I mean, you know, I think a lot of us who were close to you enough through social media, through the website, who are
Yeah,
fans of yours, how are you feeling? Because I think they may notice a little bit of a raspiness in your voice, but
yeah.
you look great. You're able to do stuff for Defy. So how are you actually feeling?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good. I need to go back, like I said, and whenever those Facebook memories come up, I need to be reminded where I was. As far as 100 feet was a big deal, or 40 feet was a big deal. As far as at some point, my heart was at 10%, and now it's in the 40s, which is pretty remarkable. Um, I need probably a new kidney, and sometimes the heart is a little iffy. I have talked to my cardiologist, and he's like, well, maybe we'll need to do a kidney and heart replacement at the same time. And that's a little show. Yeah, that was exactly my reaction. You just impersonated me. Um, and I don't know that that's going to happen or not. I'm not sure. I don't like the idea of it. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll see what 22 holds for me. So I'm doing better than I should probably have expected. My wife is very grateful because, I slept through a lot of this,
Yes.
and she was awake through a lot of it and had to live with it. She's lived through it many times and had, many doctors say to her, um, you know, make plans a few times.
Right.
And that's one thing I should say, and maybe this isn't the best message on Thanksgiving, but everybody sort of has the conversation about whether or not you want them to pull a plug on you, the
Mhm.
DNR, do not resuscitate. But, you know, they also, one time the doctors talked about, I've got a lesion, a fungus in my neck right here at C3, C4. It's like a little tiny fungus from 2012. And they talked about whether or not to remove it. And if they did, there was a very good chance I'd be a paraplegic.
Oh my
You
gosh.
know, have that conversation with your loved ones if, you want to risk that. That's a lot of pressure to put on one individual. So
My
that's kind of my point.
my mom, in lieu of that she outlives my dad, like, I had to sign paperwork in that this is what she wants in case she is in those type of moments. Like,
Right.
that's something that she's taken
Right.
care of so that I don't have to make that call. I am making that
It's,
call with her purpose in mind.
and understand what I'm saying. It's uncomfortable, but what's more uncomfortable is putting that pressure on your loved ones to make that decision and they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So
Happy
in
Thanksgiving.
well, we're gonna swing it around because in the vein of being thankful again, and don't worry, we'll talk about wrestling. We're gonna talk about Don Owen. We're gonna talk about
Whatever you
video
want.
games, all that stuff. But in the vein of what we're talking about here,
Right.
your wife, I she was our line of communication to know what was
Right.
going on with you. And she did not have to also think of us, right? She was dealing with
Well,
so much. She was, wanting, she was there for you. I'm sure she was exhausted, but she still found the time to definitely give us a little bit of information,
right.
positively and negatively about
Right.
you. And I always thought that that was so thoughtful of her and so kind because she knew that there was this extended Jim Valley family who were kind of just like, just antsy for information. We all wanted to know that you were doing better than you were the day before. And she sometimes had to deliver news that maybe wasn't that. But
Right.
what, wow, she was so I don't even know how you would describe her other than she was kind of heroic while being there for you in that way, and I just found that to be so strong for her.
She's my rock. Um, Jokingly, she always said, "You're a lot to manage." As far as, a lot of people reached out wanting to know.
Yes.
And it was amazing. From my perspective, I think she was put in a position where, she put it out there because she got so many messages of concern, which is, not a bad thing, but it is a lot to manage. She worked remotely from, my ICU when she could, when COVID allowed it. And her boss, God bless him, let her do that. He was, not against it, but he had never let anybody work remote before. And my wife has got an incredible work ethic. And so he didn't mind it because he knew that she wasn't taking advantage of the situation. She worked her ass off still there the whole time. I mean, can you imagine finding a corner of your husband's hospital room to answer questions about people's worldwide travel? And understand, she does very high end travel.
Right.
She does it for, I'm not saying these people are like, Kim Kardashian, but there are some people who spend $5,000 a night on a hotel room and don't blink.
Right.
Um, so they're very, I'm not saying they're not nice people, but they have needs and they have a level of service and an expectation that they're going to be able to reach out to her at any time. And even when her husband is, you know, maybe dying, they don't know that, but I'm just
Right.
saying.
Right.
So she juggled all of these things, her grief, the bills, the mortgage, insurance, doctors, advocating for my health, her job, and still, answering questions from fans, for lack of a better term. All of this, and with such strength and grace. So yeah, she's my rock.
So let's bring it back to wrestling for a second here because I just listened to you and Matt Farmer on your Portland Wrestlecast show talking about Don Owen and the possibility of him entering the Wrestling Observer Hall of
Right.
Fame. If he does not make it this year, he falls off the ballot. Is it forever or is it for a certain amount of years? Like, how does that work?
I think it's probably, if I were to guess with Don Owen, I think a lot of candidates are different. Some come back on because they're in the news
Right.
or something like that, or somebody advocates for them to come back on. If I were to guess, I would guess he'd probably fall off forever. I think some people fall off forever, and then Dave is like, they're historical enough that people just don't know, and he puts them on rightfully. My guess is, given Dave's opinion, that he wouldn't come back on. That Dave, I could see possibly Dave wanting to put him back on in many, many years from now, but I doubt it. Dave's opinion, and I've talked to Dave about this. I didn't want to make Dave mad in my advocacy. No, seriously. I mean, I advocate for Don Owen, but it's not so important to me that I would want to damage my relationship with Dave.
Yes. Yes.
If you understand that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not like a glory hound where it's like I need to be on the observer platform for my ego. I don't want to damage my friendship and my relationship with Dave Meltzer because I value it.
Right.
And I just asked him, and he goes, "No, it doesn't bother me." So if he's cool with it, then he's fine. Then I'm fine with it.
So a couple of years ago, it was so close for Don.
Amazingly.
And then last year, he got less votes actually. And so I wanted to quickly because I think this was actually done by Chris Harrington. He does not update this anymore because he has a more important job. But so in Don Owens, Don Owen was on the ballot in 2003. In his fifth year, he got all the way up to 51%. But it wasn't until year 15, so that'd have been 18, I guess 2017, something like that, where he got to 50%. And then in year 16, back down to 37%. In year 17, at 59%. Why do you think that fluctuation exists so much with this candidate?
Because of my show. I mean, there's no other factor. I'm sorry. I don't. I am not bragging. I'm actually surprised. When I did this show, so that year, okay, here's what happened. Going back to the very beginning, I do a podcast with Fumi.
Yes.
I was doing a podcast with Pat McNeil. I did the Observer Live on Saturdays.
Right.
Okay. Fumi is Fumi Saito.
Yes.
He's on a different level from me. I'm not. That's real. He's done so much. Get me on screen there. There it is. He's up here.
Yes.
He and Dave and maybe a few other people I can't think of and not naming are in the rarefied air. Okay? In my mind, I'm somewhere in here, which is fine. I'm not saying I should be anywhere else. But the point is when we do our show, I may have suggestions and I defer to Fumi about things.
Right.
I defer to other people about things. I wanted to do a show where I can do my own thing and I don't have to defer to anyone. Not that I'm unhappy in any way. I'm just saying I wanted my own sandbox.
Right.
With Wrestling Observer Live, it is or was my own thing, but it's still their branding.
Sure.
I felt a responsibility to Brian for whether I should or not. And Brian puts no pressure on me.
Right.
Brian is fantastic. There are days when I want to reveal the curtain about both Dave and Brian, but out of respect to them, they don't, so I won't. But I just say, in all honesty, I love both of them so much, and they're so great. And there are things that I think people who don't like them and do like them don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this.
Yes.
I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I don't mean to be a jerk to people who don't know. Understand, this is not my story. I'm not trying to blue ball you, but it's not my story to tell.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying. But they're both fantastic in ways that I can't express. Anyway, so I wanted to do my own show for my own sandbox, and there's no Portland wrestling thing. Of the cajillion podcasts and vloggers that exist in the world, I thought, well, there's a tiny little niche that I can do. Now, I don't know the most about Portland wrestling. There are many people, but I probably have the best storytelling ability. So that's why I decided to do it. Now, when I decided to do it, and I didn't even think about Don Owen being in the Hall of Fame. And I did it for a year, and then suddenly Dave said, well, Don Owen is going to fall off the ballot. And I thought, well, it just sort of happened organically. And I thought, well, if he falls off the ballot, what's the point of my show?
Right.
And also, there's nobody who qualifies for the ballot for just being in Portland. Portland wasn't big enough or influential enough for territory for anyone to just be in from Portland wrestling. Certainly Lonnie Main, Piper, obviously. There are some people who came through where Portland was a big deal and they were a big deal in Portland for sure, but there's nothing exclusively Portland. The closest person to exclusively Portland is Don Owen. So I went, well, I should probably advocate. And it was just a coincidence. I did not have that foresight. So I did a show with Tom Pritchard, Mike Rogers, and Matt Farmer advocating for Don Owen. And I even talked about the negatives. And for those who don't know, There was a promoter in the Northwest. His name was Dean Silverstone. It just passed away recently. Great guy. Dean was Jewish, and also he was he knew Sam Mushnick. And Sam Mushnick, for those who don't know, was the longtime president of the NWA and also Jewish. So Dean Silverstone competed in Washington at times, and Don saw him as a competitor. Anyway, Dean and Don didn't get along, but also Dean heard Don complain about the president of the NWA. And Don was an old man, and Don complained about, at the time, and this is, the cheap Jewish stereotype.
Sure.
And so Dean thought Don was anti-Semitic. Was he? That's your decision to make. And I'm fine if you think he was and you're against voting for him. That's your decision to make. And I put it out there exactly like that. And it was a smaller territory. We're up here in the corner. We're not that influential. People often forget about us. Being in the Northwest is like an island. Those are the negatives. And I put those out there. And at the time, when the voting came out and Don came within like 2 votes or whatever it was, I was surprised that it did that well. I thought that he would just make the cusp of not getting dropped off the ballot, and maybe the next year's show I could push to get him in. But I was tickled and surprised that I had that much influence. So to answer your question, I did the show again with Matt Farmer talking about it, and we'll see what happens.
So one of the reasons why people vote for Don is because he actually was a really good paying promoter, where what he would actually pay was 3x in some cases more than some of these other promoters in these bigger territories.
Yeah.
What is if you had the elevator pitch to somebody who didn't know anything about Don Owen, what is the main reason, the number one reason why you think he should go in?
Longevity. Don, his dad was a promoter starting in like 1925. But Don, his dad fell ill, so Don was doing a lot when he was still a very young man. So of those 65, 70 years where he promoted, a lot of that 65 is Don. Don knew his audience. Don, if you average it out, it's probably 500 people a night for 65 years. So that is, a lot of people. And also you consider per capita, the Northwest was still developing as an area, as a location. It was very rural, very logger based, a lot of natural resources. Timber was king. So, he drew a lot compared to the population.
Sure. So where does your wrestling fandom begin?
My dad died when I was very young. And my mother's husband, my stepfather, was from Mexico. And so they watched wrestling. So I watched, back in the 70s, there was one, you didn't have, you had one TV at the time, and so we, kind of had a communal watching. And so he watched wrestling. So I watched wrestling, and it was, I liked wrestling, but it was part of Star Wars or Kiss or, what have you at the time. It was an interest, but it wasn't the interest. And then Roddy Piper came along, became a good guy, and Piper is so charismatic and such a great talker that then it became, the focus of every childhood. You have a passion, whether it's video games or music or what have you. And then when Piper came along, it was like, I love Piper. And then someone bought me my first wrestling magazine, and then I got into wrestling magazines, and I kind of followed Piper, and then then cable happened. You had to watch more wrestling and the Road Warriors, and there was always these breadcrumbs that I kept following as things blew up. It's like then Georgia wrestling, and then that led to WrestleMania. So then that was a big thing. And then I just kept following, and it became just, you get the drug and you just
Yeah.
are addicted.
Were you going to live shows when you were younger?
We had wrestling in, the next town over at the high school, like once every 2-3 months. Yeah.
So,
You want to hear about my first live show?
yeah.
Well, I remember. There may have been one before it, but I'm not sure. My first live show was headlined by Andre the Giant
Oh, wow.
against Buddy Rose and Ed Wiskowski, who was Colonel De Beers.
Yes.
Gino Hernandez was like a young baby face on the underneath card. Jesse Ventura, Jimmy Snuka, Bull Ramos, and a whole bunch of other people, but an incredible array of talent from top to bottom. Yeah.
And so you're growing up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
A town halfway between Seattle and Portland, Oregon. So we got Oregon TV and Seattle television. So what would happen on Channel 12 in Portland was you got 90 minutes of the Saturday show. And then up in Seattle on a couple of, it bounced around in Seattle, but you got 60 minutes of the next so each Portland show was like 3 hours or so. So you got 90 minutes and then the next 60 minutes from the Seattle show each time.
Yes. It's crazy how TV worked market by market back then. There were things that I remember watching. I always joke, with my co-host on the Fight Game podcast, John the Rocca, when we're growing up and we're watching these NWA, WCW cards, they're always talking about the Omni, and we're like, well, how come we can't go to the Omni? Like, I want to see, Sting against Ric Flair, like, and they wouldn't. WCW would come out here, NWA would come out here every once in a while, but they wouldn't be here as much as WWF was. You every other month you could see Hogan against the newest, biggest bad guy, but it was like, man, I want to go to the Omni. Like, that was always my thing, was like, MSG, of course, but I was like, the other one was, I just want to go to the Omni because see all these great matches.
I remember watching it, Georgia Championship Wrestling, World Championship Wrestling, and thinking, God, they have so much wrestling in the area. What's wrong with my area? That we don't have that much wrestling.
Exactly.
What's wrong with the people I live with?
Just as much as, maybe even more so, one of the intrigues that I have as in your fandom is in video games and cabinets, and because of my age, I grew up. I want to say I would have been 7 or 8 years old, maybe even a little bit younger, when we first got our Atari 2600.
You had oh wow!
I can remember.
Did we just become best friends?
I can remember my dad brings home this system, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing. And he's like, no, you're not going to play yet because I need to sort of figure out what this thing is. I think somewhat was he wanted to do that, but also he just wanted to play. Like, he was just like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And so I can remember, like, first night, I don't get to touch it. Second night, maybe I don't really get to touch it. And then finally he was like, okay, this is fine. And I'm over it. And so then it became mine. And it was even in my room on my little black and white TV. So I go back as far as that, but I have cousins who go even further back to the Intellivision and old systems like that. So I was able to play some of these old systems. I actually, after ColecoVision kind of went out of business, we bought one just because it was cheaper, and I probably should have kept it because it's probably worth something today. But so I got to play some ColecoVision stuff, like, back, even after. So I have like a pretty good history with all of those old systems.
Oh my God!
But
we need to hang out more.
But your fandom and your cabinets and all that stuff is.
I should. If I unplug from this, I should take it into my game room.
Yeah, no, it'd be awesome. Like, one day we're gonna have to.
Seriously,
we're gonna have
to walk you downstairs.
We're gonna have to.
Let me try.
Okay.
Hang on.
All right.
Yeah. edit this out if this doesn't work. I'm going to unplug the audio and we'll see. Will it switch over automatically?
Good
Or we'll
question. I
have
don't
to do
know.
it manually.
I don't know.
Okay, this could screw up royally. We'll find
All right.
out.
The audio, the podcast will be easy to edit out, but we'll
All
see
right,
about the video.
let's see if this happens.
Nope, cannot hear you.
Is that working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're going for a walk. Here we go.
Right, so Jim has just unplugged his mic and his computer microphone has picked up his audio.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Here's the Disney art if you want to see it. You like Disney?
Yes. Very
All right.
cool. Don't worry,
this
I
is
will.
what we
I am
call-
going to ask you about amusement parks in a little bit. That's
This is
also
what
on
we call the
agenda.
media room. Hang on. Now we're on video games. Oh, I go.
So for the audio only audience, we are walking. Jim is walking with his computer.
Here's a bonus. Ready?
Yes.
Sherman.
Oh, there you go.
There's Sherman. Hi, Sherman.
Jim's
There's
cat Sherman.
He's so furry. Look at this.
Stretching out.
Look how furry he is. Very furry. Anyway.
We just had to take my dog Iggy to the groomer today. So he was very curly and fluffy, so he's not going to be curly and
They're
fluffy.
all the video games. You can see a GameCube, my
There we go.
original 64, an Atari 5200. I gave away my ColecoVision to someone who grew up with it like you did. And
Yeah.
I got tired of it. Here's a PlayStation 4. I'm not sure if I'm going to go to Xbox or PS5. I'm not sure I want to get that deep. All right, here we go.
So the PlayStation 5 for me is really for the ability to communicate with my kids, because I'll get on with them and it's almost like we're on a phone call, even though they just don't know it, that this is my way of making sure that I get them on the phone to chat with me. So that's how I do it. We play NBA 2K on the headset, and that's kind of our 1 to 2 hour conversation every week.
Where are you? There you are. My wife just got back
Hello.
for a walk.
Hi.
There's my fabulous wife.
We were talking about you earlier, so
I think she can hear you. We're talking about how great you are. We have
Yeah.
Everybody loves you.
You're very kind.
She says you're very kind. Hey, going down to the game room. Here we go.
Get the sneak peek of Casa de Valle here.
Yeah, it's 6 levels.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope you don't have bad knees.
No, but my ankles are shot.
Yeah.
I have nerve damage down there, so they don't move all the way. All right, here we go. Are you ready?
This is the exclusive.
Ready? Here we go.
Oh my goodness, he's got the WrestleFest game.
The 4-player WrestleFest game.
Wow. That is awesome.
Not only that, I bought a jam-up board that plays 4-player Simpsons on it too.
Oh, really? Because they just put the Simpsons game out for Arcade One, didn't they?
Those 1-ups suck.
Oh.
You bought the NBA Jam.
Well, I bought the NBA Jam one.
And
if I didn't have my green screen, you would have been able to see it. It's completely fine for me.
For one person.
But I don't have the, I'm sure
It's
the
fine.
expectation that you have in this stuff.
Can you play 4 people on it?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, but they've got to be very
They're
petite people.
We're kind of like
Right.
extending our arms out because it's a smaller machine.
There's the oops, what am I doing? There we go. There's the Simpsons, the
That's
first
a
one.
pinball game.
The pinball.
There you go.
So in case you're wondering, everyone sees these and thinks I'm like, loaded. Most of these I bought as a bargain. Believe it or not, this WrestleFest, some guy found it in a barn.
Oh
and
wow!
sold it to me. Yeah.
And it plays great.
Yeah, I mean the cabinet's not mint or anything,
Right.
but they all got pretty hard use in an arcade. I bought this. There's the Altercade Legends. I added a bunch of games to that, so I think it comes with like 50 games, maybe 25, and I loaded. It's got like over 100 on it now. Um, I bought that. A friend of mine called me. He was at a Costco nearby, and this was a floor model that was on sale. So I think I bought it for like 12, maybe 1,200,
Wow.
something like that. Um, I'm selling a couple of these. I may
Yeah, I
sell
saw
that.
that.
I may sell this one. I'm not sure. Probably.
And are you selling them because you need the space, or you're just
I
like,
may
kind of
I may
over it?
change this to a studio down here,
Okay.
but I nobody comes and plays them anymore.
Yeah.
And not just before COVID even. It was like, I don't know. It's the loneliest, saddest arcade now. Um, there's a Miss Pac-Man I'm selling.
Centipede.
Oh, okay. The centipede. I love the centipede. I'm never selling the centipede. The centipede is original, and you can see it's there's no chipping really.
Yeah.
It's in fantastic shape.
And that's the one with the trackball, right?
Right. And here's a story. My wife, when she was a girl, babysat for an attorney and their family, and she would always play it when they went to their house. So he was an attorney, and he represented a wife in a divorce, and the husband only wanted one thing from the divorce.
Wow.
Yeah. So that cost me $200 and some refurb because the trackball was in bad shape.
Oh, okay.
But I've got a guy, so that's pretty cool. So there's the arcade.
Do you,
Oh, here, check this out. I love these. This when I first moved here, I was on the kick because I had all the space to buy games. This I used to have like a bunch of other games, and the whole space was filled. Anyway, here is some Atari original art.
wow.
These are things that used to hang on a string, so they're double sided. But you can see like warlords
Yeah,
and different things.
that's awesome.
And then so we got some original from the 70s or 80s, I guess primarily 80s Atari art that I
Wow.
framed myself. So
Here's a question for you.
yeah.
Do you have a holy grail
Oh,
unit that if money were no option and there was one available for you that you would immediately buy?
oh yeah. I mean, I would love to have the Simpsons pinball from the 2000s. It would be great to have, I mean, everybody I think wants the expensive games,
Yeah.
Tron,
Yeah.
Star Wars. Um, here's the thing: is living in the Seattle area, you're home of a lot of Microsoft um,
Sure.
and Amazon millionaires. I think having an arcade in this area is very common. So a lot of these games, while they're here, are not for sale.
Right. Right.
Um, so that's just the thing is it's if you go a few miles to from Kirkland where I live to Redmond, Washington, then you'll see a lot of fancy race cars and things and single guys and women who have too much money for the first time.
um
There you go. There's the tour.
that was a great tour. We got to see the house, we got to see the game room.
Yeah.
So you're thinking of turning into a studio. Is it to just to do more audio stuff, or is
You know, my wife, as I mentioned, is in the travel business, and we do some travel YouTube. But we were kind of just getting it started
uh-huh.
uh, before COVID hit, so we haven't traveled as much. But I'm thinking, you know, sort of a travel version of kind of what you and I are doing here.
No, that's very cool.
Yeah. And
Okay,
also,
so
when my voice gets better, maybe being able to access some more video for the observer too, is sort of multi-purpose.
well, the thing about your voice, I find it very courageous of you to continue to record here and then, because we're all this is a vanity thing. Like, we have all the tech and the microphones to sound good, even though I'm just wearing a Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt, so it can't be too vanity. But the voice is your power as a podcaster, as a broadcaster. and it is not up to what you believe, because you have a very unique voice. It is not up to, I'm
It's
sure.
not great. It was never great.
But it was unique. Like, if you heard Jim Valley's voice, you immediately knew who it was. And the fact that it isn't up to probably what you believe par is, like, do you have any worries about that? Like, do you expect the voice to come back 100%? Like, where does that stand?
Well, I think that it's twofold. There's, the lungs, as we talked about, I don't think they're quite 100%. So, that's part of the equation as far as you need air to finish sentences and not take a breath every 3 syllables. The other issue is being able to control it with muscles that are weaker now as well. And then the third issue is that there's vocal cord damage. And my throat doctor, she's badass, love her. But I wish she wasn't as conservative at the moment.
Right.
There's another exploratory operation that I'm gently advocating for. And that she's like, your voice seems better. Why don't we give it more time? Whether you can say it's, I have too high of expectations, I'm delusional, however you want to phrase it. I thought my voice would be healed by now.
Right.
But it's not. To be blunt, there's a lot of sympathy for me, and I'm very, very grateful for all of it. But I feel like I would spend that capital if I used it all of the time, because I recognize that I take a lot of breaths.
Right.
I recognize that, when I do Defy, for example, there are people, some of the indie guys may know who I am, and I don't expect people to know who I am. Understand that. I don't care. But, like, for example, we had Lance Archer there a couple of months ago, and when we got done, he was like, "What's the deal with your voice? You sound like Johnny Ace." That funny?
That's funny.
Anyway, and sometimes in character for heat, people decide, wrestlers make the choice without talking to me, and I don't care to make fun of my voice or something. It's fine.
Yeah.
But my point is I think on a consistent basis, people would probably roll their eyes and tune out.
Sure.
So I make the choice to pick my spots.
Well, I mean, I think it's, better than anybody else. But I would also say that because of the context of what you have to say, that is just as, or maybe even more important than your voice. And it's all about how comfortable you are with it, I think, because once you're comfortable with it, your audience is going to be comfortable with it. So, that's just something that you have to deal with. But no, I think it's very courageous of you to even be doing this. Once I heard that you were doing the show with Matt, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I get to hear Jim's voice again. I want to hear his voice before I get to talk to him, because that's kind of, my ears,
it didn't bother you.
No. So I'll tell you why. So people always ask me when I do the shows with Dave Meltzer, like, kind of what is the key to that? Because it's a much different show than he normally does with Brian. I would say we're a little bit more conversational than he is with Brian. Brian, they're doing news, they're doing updates, they're going at it with, like, the information that, people want to hear. But when I get to talk to Dave, I'll make it a little bit more of a back and forth. And I tell them, I said, the thing that is most valuable to me are my ears, because some of the pacing and some of the familiarity I have with Dave is because I've been listening to him for 20 however long years, right? When he first started Wrestling Observer Live, I've listened to every single show on the F4W website that he and Brian have done. I have not skipped one. So I have such a familiarity with his voice. I can almost always, not 100%, but I can almost always know when he's going to end a sentence and when I can then come in, or I can tell by the pitch in his voice whether he's really excited to talk about something. So then I follow up, or whether he's just done. Because if he's done, I could have the greatest follow up question and he's just going to bury it because he's done talking about it. So that is my key with Dave. And so that's why I wanted to hear your voice, because I wanted to hear how you sounded so I could familiarize a little bit more for this show, because my ears are my my most valuable thing in doing podcasts is the listening aspect. So okay, I've had you here for already 50 minutes. Time has gone by so quickly. I do want to hit a couple other topics. I won't keep you too much longer, but
Whatever you want to do.
in addition to the video games, which I find really interesting, there is an amusement park aficionado in you and your wife that I get to see photos of, and I'm sure that is part of the travel gene that you both have. We would know, pro wrestling fans would know amusement parks because of Mick Foley. Like, Mick Foley is a gigantic aficionado to amusement parks. So what do you love about amusement parks?
Let me tell you a story. When Mick Foley was writing and was very, really at his zenith, being on the New York Times bestseller list, he and I met. God, what was it at? I don't remember. He made some public appearance at some event in Portland. And I brought a roller coaster guide. So understand, this was like the 2000s when you still bought guidebooks. It was like 2000. So I brought some roller coaster guidebook. And Mick Foley, one, being cheap, and two, being a wrestler, and three, being a celebrity, goes, "Give this to me." And me, being me, I was like, "Yeah, no." And so he goes, "Well, I'll tell you what. If you give this to me, give me your name and address, and I will send you my version with all of my notes and autographed." And this was one of those things at the time, because it was 2000, that came out every year. So I was like, well, how different can it be? Plus, it's got his notes and he'll autograph it for me. I'll have something unique. Well, so I gave it to him under that condition. So I waited. Didn't come. But I had a contact for him because I'd interviewed him.
Yeah.
And so I think I called him and left a message saying, "Hey, it's me. Don't forget, send me the book."
Yeah.
And then he sent me the book, and I still have it. And not that long ago, when he was doing his comedy tour, whenever that was, he came here, and I brought the book. And I didn't expect him to remember me. And he goes, "How did you get this book?" And then I just explained the story to him, and he signed it again. So I have a roller coaster book signed twice by Mick Foley.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favorite park that you would
Tokyo Disney Sea.
Oh, wow.
So SEA, for those who don't know, Tokyo Disney is spelled SEA. And it's the sister park to Tokyo Disneyland. And it's the most detailed, immersive park in the world. It's incredible.
Wow. Do they have, I would imagine Nintendo has something with a park related, right?
They just opened up Nintendo World, a section of Universal Studios Japan in Osaka. They were supposed to open it in 2020, and they opened it up in 2021.
Is that you're circling that one to go out there?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Usually what has happened the past few years is I would go to Wrestle Kingdom, cover Wrestle Kingdom, and then either meet my wife at Tokyo Disney Sea or Tokyo Disneyland Resort, or go by myself. As a matter of fact, the last year I did it in 19, I think it was, I went by myself, and my wife saw my pictures, and she got so excited we went like a month and a half later because she wanted to go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so current wrestling landscape today,
Right.
end of 2021. What are you watching? What are you paying attention to, if anything, these days?
You talking about big picture? What do you want to talk about? What do you mean?
Well, I don't imagine you're sitting there watching 3 hours of Raw every Monday. Maybe you are. I don't know. But are you following AEW? Are you
Of course.
excited about the opportunity that AEW is providing for folks?
Hang on, one quick thing. I'll show this. This is me at Tokyo Disneyland. Can you see that?
There you go.
There's me. There we go.
Yes, yes.
They were taking a picture, and I was like, "Here, let me take the picture for you." And then I said, "Hey, I want a picture." And then they posed like that.
That's awesome.
It was the year of the boar, so they were selling those hats.
There you go. There you go.
And then they wanted a picture like this too. So
there you go.
Very nice people. So it's the greatest picture I'll ever take. So. Anyway, we were talking about wrestling.
Yes, I just wanted to bring it back to wrestling for a little bit. AEW, are you a fan, or are you watching
absolutely.
regularly?
It's different. How could you not be? You know, it's because WWE, while it did and it didn't have a monopoly on wrestling, so many people, I was talking with a guy that I've met through social, and he goes, I wasn't old enough to see WCW.
Oh, wow.
And immediately I did the Matt Damon old meme. But, it has, for better or for worse, shaped the way, people see wrestling. There's an expectation, much like Marvel has shaped the way people's expectations are for blockbuster movies.
Yeah.
WWE has shaped the concept of what is good and bad in wrestling. If you listen, and for whatever reason, if you do, you don't, again, your choice. If you listen to Jim Cornette, he will say, "Oh, AEW screwed up in this presentation."
Yeah.
So-and-so should have said or stood or done this. And, there is an expectation of what is right and what is wrong in wrestling. And AEW has shown that there are other ways to do it.
Sure.
And I appreciate that. I also appreciate that it is skewed younger.
Yes.
Wrestling is much like movies or whatever. It's a projection. I want to be Roman Reigns.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be Roddy Piper. I want to be MJF, Jericho, Jungle Boy, Britt Baker, whomever. It's a aspirational character. And, everybody wants their generation accepted. And I came of a generation, Gen X, where you have all the selfish baby boomers, because there's a gajillion of them. And now you have all the selfish people, the Zoomers, because there's a gajillion of them. And my generation never really had the numbers. And that's fine. But anyway, I'm glad to keep wrestling alive, you need the new blood. And I'm glad now that AEW shows younger aspirational characters, is my point.
Did you went to a live AEW show, right?
Yeah, I went to All Out, the first one, the one a couple of years ago. Yeah, in Chicago. Yeah. That's when I was useful on the website.
Did you go to a Dynamite not too long ago?
Oh, yeah. You want the whole story on that?
Yeah.
So I was at physical rehab, and I was joking at this story I was kind of telling, that I'm getting in shape so I can go back to Japan with Dave. And, it's a hustle in Japan to go from all of these different places. It's a lot of walking. And so I joked, like, getting in shape for Tokyo. And I took a nap afterwards because I'm an old man. And I was tired. And I got up and I was like, looking at my phone. Why is there so much traction on this phone? What is happening here? And Tony Khan had responded, well, you look like you're in shape for Daly's place right now. And it turned out that I was already going to Florida because my wife had a work thing.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, could we, instead of flying into Orlando, fly into Jacksonville?
Yeah.
And it turned out to be cheaper. So the answer was yes. And so I messaged Tony and I was like, are you serious? He's like, oh, absolutely. And Tony, again, who I don't know, had donated, $2,400 or $25, something like that, to my GoFundMe. And so had Chris Jericho. And I found out later that Tony listens to Pacific Rim because he's a big Japanese wrestling fan. So that's how he kind of knew who I was. So we ended up flying into Jacksonville, and like a handful of other people saw this and decided they wanted to go. So I had to message Tony and these people and go, hey, can I get tickets for like 10 of us? And so we had our own section. And so my wife and I, Chris Harrington, took my wife and I backstage. And as we're checking in the back in the parking lot, I'm in a wheelchair because for long distances, I'm in a wheelchair.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to tell you the real story.
Okay.
Now listen to me. All of you people watching, I am talking to you. Don't share this. This is just between us. Okay. Very serious. No hashtags. Don't tweet at me about this. All right. I'm trusting you. This doesn't go any farther. Okay. All right. And it's a good thing. All right. So anyway, I'm in a wheelchair and look at me. I'm a human skeleton. I look terrible. All right.
You do not look terrible, by the way.
But I can stand. I can walk. We're just preserving my energy. Okay. That's why I had the wheelchair. It's easier this way. So anyway, I'm in a wheelchair, so my field of vision is different from my wife who's pushing me. So we're backstage, or we're approaching in the parking lot. There's semi-trailers and things, so my field of vision is limited. Anyway, as we're going around a corner, my wife goes, there's the Big Show. So we say hi to the Big Show because my wife knows him. And he's so kind, and he takes a picture, and he's very personable. He's very nice. So we check in. Chris Harrington takes us backstage. Again, I'm in a wheelchair. So we're in a wheelchair, pushing backstage, and there's Dustin Runnels. Dustin Runnels looks at me. Hey, buddy, how you doing? He could not have been nicer. We take a picture and everything. Vicky Guerrero comes up. Could not have been nicer. Very, very nice. Everybody. So it occurs to me that they think I'm probably like a Make-A-Wish adult.
Yes.
That my last wish was to meet. But they could not have been nicer. I want to make that very, very clear. They were incredibly nice, but it's probably because they thought I was dead.
Yes. I mean, this is some of the work that they generally do for folks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we go to a special area that's behind a door. Cody Rhodes is there. Again, super nice. I meet Tony. Tony's, oh, Jim, and he knows who I am. He's very, very nice. We knock on a door. We see Chris Jericho. Again, Chris knows who I am. Very nice. Chris donated to my GoFundMe.
Yes.
So, very nice. I saw Luther. I knew Luther from working up here in the Northwest. He had one of my shirts on. Super good guy. Love Luther. Anyway, but it's like all of the people who saw me who didn't know who I was, and that's most of them, probably thought that, they took me out of an ICU.
No, that's a great story.
They could not have been nicer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tony does a good job of those things for
That was
sure.
very nice.
Yeah.
But that they, donated the money they did. And um, again, I know Jericho probably, primarily through Fumi, and more than likely, he and Luther probably, had some sort of, quick discussion or something. But, I don't want anyone to think that I'm like somebody, or I think I'm somebody. It was just sort of a thing that happened.
No, so it's it's a really good story. Okay, so as we close this
What
thing
were we
down,
talking about? Have we
as we
talked about wrestling?
as we close this down, because you
Yeah.
are doing stuff for Defy, and you're going
Yeah.
to do something later today for Defy as we're recording this.
Yeah.
On your goals, on your lists of things to do in 2022, uh, I'm assuming if all things go well, you'd love to do a little bit more recording. You'd love to do a little bit more traveling. But do you have like a short list of things like this is what I want to get done in 2022?
I'd like to get my voice back, or get it where it's better. I mean, I never had a great voice. Um, I'm a guy that has to get by on, you know, other aspects, having different content, having, I mean, again, I don't know, I've ever told people this. When I did Wrestling Observer Live, I had everything written out as far as exactly what I produced a show
Mm-hmm.
every time. It wasn't just me turning on a mic and babbling about what I saw on TV.
Right.
And I felt like I had to do different content to give value to stand out. And I'm not talking about shocking for the purpose of shocking or anything, but just different points of view,
Mm-hmm.
not contrarian to be contrarian, anything like that, but just a different perspective and take a few more risks to be different and not just an echo chamber. I mean, Brian and Dave, I agree with them almost all the time, but I didn't want to come by and just echo sentiments that I necessarily agree with. I didn't say I disagreed with them, but I want to come up with my own thing,
Right.
my own image and my own take on things. So, and I think I did that. I think that's why people listened. Um, I was blown away how many people tweeted at me when I was sick. Blown away. I thought I did this third level show on the Observer, and a few people listened, but not as many as did. I'm super grateful for that. So for the coming year, I'd like to get my voice back. I want to do Observer Live again. I'd like to do shows with Dave again, shows with Brian again. I want to do some more travel stuff with my wife. We have done some travel videos you can find on my YouTube. And unlike the other YouTubers, same philosophy. I try to give value there. We try to talk about the pluses and minuses of the resorts or things we go to versus, hey, this is us. Aren't we cute and funny?
Right.
Aren't
Right.
we great? Look at my rack. Look at, look at me eating. Aren't I funny and cute? We don't do that. We
Yes.
try to give value, not, enough value, but the idea is that we make a soft sell so people want to book with my wife, and many of them do. Obviously, I would say a larger percentage than I figured do, but I mean, not like the majority or anything like that, because that's just the era we live in.
Yes.
But so that's kind of my philosophy. So we want to set up the studio so we can do maybe more things like this and give content in that way, because we can't get out as much. But so to help her business, which is remarkable. So we've done that. So in all honesty, I've done really well. Not as well as I thought, but probably my expectations were too high. But I want to get my life back.
Yeah.
Um, but I should also be probably happier with what I have, and maybe that ties back to Thanksgiving.
Well, I want to say thank you for doing this. And also, again, you helping me out very early on, you teaching me that lesson that was very valuable to me, because not only did you teach me that lesson, that trickles down, right? Because I have kids and I immediately said, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we have to think about this. I have stepkids, my wife. So, that information, that knowledge, that wisdom, it doesn't just go to me, it goes to a lot of people and people that I talk to. So thank you for that. I really appreciate you coming on to do this, and all of those things that you want to do in 2022. I'm going to be rooting for you in your corner, and anytime you need any encouragement or whatever, I'm going to be there for you, Jim.
I appreciate it. No, thank you. It's funny. You never know how you affect people. And I guess that's maybe the message to pass along on Thanksgiving is, we live in a very different time. It can be very frustrating, it can be very angering, but you know, be gentle where you can, be helpful. I mean, I don't see you. Someone could think that you and I are competitive for whatever reason. And you don't see it that way. I don't see it that way. And maybe in your life, see it as other people, you're not really in competition with them, and help them out and lift them up. And even if they even if they're jerks and aren't worthy of it, it's still probably the better way to handle it.
Yeah.
Because if they're jerks, they're still going to F you in the end. So it doesn't matter. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
All right. So for Jim,
What
I'm
a
Double
terrible
G.
message.
I'm Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Have a great holiday. Peace.
I love
out.
you all. I sincerely do. Thank you for everything. No one can ever badmouth wrestling fans around me. I'm sincerely grateful for all of you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
All right. Take care, Jim.
You too, man.